Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session all about returns. Yes, we are doing another e-commerce explored webinar. I have a very lively group of panelists waiting in the wings. So this is going to be a super fun session, I think. I have a feeling they might challenge me on disorder, but we shall see what happens. It's going to be fun. It's going to be, you're going to learn a lot too. We are here, though, to talk about returns. How do we go about minimizing them? How do we reduce the impact of returns on your business from a financial standpoint, a sustainability standpoint, a customer experience standpoint? How do we, from the whole remit of your business, the whole remit of the customer journey, how do we adapt that? How do we use that to reduce the negative impact of returns and potentially enhance the positive impact of returns? These e-commerce explored events are brought together by two of the two sides of my business: e-commerce tech, the more US focused, tech focused bit, and e-commerce master plan, which is the more podcast and Europe focused piece. So we come together to do these old debates about hot e-commerce topics. And this one is sponsored by three brilliant software companies, eDesk, Tidio, and Penny Black. So huge thank you to those three for making all this possible. Even more important, dare we say, than our sponsors are our panelists. So shortly, I will be joined by these four brilliant people who all have a very different angle on the world of returns. They'll explain more about that when they come on stage. But yeah, we've got some seriously clever people who know a lot about returns from different angles coming on to answer your questions. We've got Sarah McVitie from Drasipi, we've got Sophie O'Bard from Yalo, Josh Pittman from Priory Direct, and Amber Forbes from 5784 Commerce. They are ready to answer your questions as well as mine. So if you've got questions, get them in the comments area. To the right of the video you are watching, there should be a little comments section. Feel free to say hello in there too if you want to, because that feeds straight through to me and to the panelists. But also get your questions in there for the panelists to answer. You're welcome to add questions and comments at any point during this live session. But the earlier you get your questions in, the greater the chance there is that I will manage to ask them of our panelists, because we have limited time today. We cannot carry on until midnight. We have to finish a lot sooner than that. So get the questions in early. If you come along to this going, I really hope they're going to talk about something, one particular angle of returns, get that question in now, and then I will be able to make sure we get that through to our panelists and hopefully get it answered to you. If you wait till the last 5 minutes, it's almost certainly that we're not going to manage to cover it. Okay, I think that is everything I need to tell you in advance. You're being very quiet, which is kind of cool, but do feel free to use that comments and send stuff through to me if you want to, because I'd love to hear from you. But it's time we got a lot less quiet and we got the panelists on stage. So let's get rid of the slide deck. And let's bring up Amber and Josh and Sophie and Sarah. Hello, everybody. How are you all? Good, I hope.
Very good,
right.
thank you.
Excellent.
Hello.
Right. Hello. Okay, I would love you all to tell the audience a bit about you, a bit about your background, the company you come from, and your initial thoughts on returns, I suppose, kind of your headline about it all. We'll start with Amber, and then we'll work clockwise around the screen, because that just makes it really easy to know who's going next. Amber, please let us know a bit more about yourself and 5874.
Amazing. So I'm Amber Forbes. I am a senior client success manager at 5874 Commerce. We are an e-commerce agency that work with our clients right from sort of initial consultation of concept, kind of through to the project implementation, delivery, and support. A bit about me is that I've been working in e-commerce now for around about 5 years. And I'd probably consider e-commerce generally to be one of sort of my special subjects. It's something that I would probably talk about in sort of a social setting and corner you in the corner and talk to you for days if I kind of got the opportunity to bring up the subject. Additionally, I also have a degree in sustainability where my course thesis sort of focused quite heavily on data analytics. So I think in that respect, I can contribute kind of quite uniquely to the angle of discussion from that perspective as well.
Brilliant. Love that, Amber. And yeah, I can quite easily corner someone. I think it's a good skill. Josh.
What a horrific introduction. I'm going to get cornered. I'm frightened. I'm Josh Pittman. I'm Managing Director at Priory Direct. We're a sustainable packaging retailer. We're a certified B Corp. We focus on helping companies minimize the impact of their operations on the environment and improve the customer experience and sustainability in that space through the lens of packaging and supply chain. And obviously returns are things we come up against a lot. So keen to talk about them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Josh. I see I told you everybody, very different perspectives coming in here. Sophie.
Hi everyone. So I'm Sophie. I'm originally from France, based in Sweden, where the company Yellow is actually based. And I work with return every day, 24 hours. So Yellow is actually a return management platform. So that's 100% of what we do. So it's a software that we sell to e-commerce merchants, mostly selling fashion. So that's really a sort of our expertise. And the DNA of the company, really the vision, was actually to help brands reduce return rates. So the solution is, like a return portal where the customer can register the return request, and then we automate all the work for the customer support, and especially we also get all the data about returns that we can talk more with Amber, maybe, and how to use that data to reduce the return rates. So yeah, I think this topic makes a lot of sense for me, and I'm really happy to share everything I learned on the journey working for 100 of and our merchants are based in different markets in Europe, so we're not, especially in the Nordics, we'll have clients in the UK and other European markets.
Sophie, quick follow-up question. Do you find there's any difference in returns between different countries' consumers and how they behave, or is it the same everywhere?
No, definitely different behaviors. So just to give one example, like Germany is a home market of the Zalando, try to keep one. So return rates are typically above 50%. US clients, much less heavy returners, especially when they buy from Europe. So yeah, we definitely see, and I would say like it's country and type of brands as well. It can have a very big impact on the return rate and behavior.
Ah, cool. Good to know. Thank you. And Sarah, last but not least, please let us know a bit more about yourself.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah McVitie, one of the co-founders at Dressipy. We build kind of predictive AI very specifically for fashion, apparel and sportswear retailers. We work with big retailers kind of across the globe. And predominantly what we're trying to do is make sure we only show things that you are going to keep. So typically our clients will see kind of 2 to 3 percentage point reduction in returns by just not showing them the stuff that they're going to return in the first place. And then we do a lot of work really understanding what's driving those return rates and what the key factors are, what the customer says versus what they do, and actually what's really driving that return rate in. So that's what we do. So I mean, spent lots of time in lots of returns data really trying to understand what the drivers are and what the key things are that make people or make returns so unprofitable in a business.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those returns, one of those topics that you can tackle from so many angles. Dan from Wild Nutrition, thank you very much for your question. Undoubtedly, we will be getting onto that a little later on. But first off, I have a couple of points of view, I suppose, that I want to share with our panelists and get their take on before we kind of go freeform. The first of which is the biggest barrier to reducing returns is a brand's organisational structure. The reason I say this, to give you a bit of background on it, is because so often returns doesn't kind of like, it impacts on every single aspect of a business. As Sarah was saying, right the way through from what your website displays, through to the marketing you do, through to the packaging materials that go out, through to how you handle the customer service, the warehouse, it impacts on everything. But yet frequently it's pretty much not owned by anyone historically in a business. It might appear on a spreadsheet somewhere, but no one is looking at the whole piece. So that's my pitch for why the biggest barrier to reducing returns is a brand's org structure. What does everyone think? Sarah, you were nodding, hopefully in agreement. So I'll come to you first and then we'll work our way through the team.
So I always find it amazing. So I spend a lot of time looking at returns, and I've actually just done a report looking at UK, and it's almost every single. So if you go into I don't know, annual report for a retailer, they will say every 1% percentage point reduction return is worth X million of revenue and usually at least 500,000 of EBIT, right? So depending on the size, but it's a huge, everyone understands the size of the prize if you can get that return rate down. And yet because no one owns it, so the CFO cares, but no one really owns it within a business. So everybody knows it's important. So I think understanding that some returns are good returns and some returns are bad returns, understanding which ones are profitable and which ones are unprofitable, and understanding each customer and each product at a profitability level. So I think the problem is it, as you say, it affects so many parts of the business that trying to find somebody to own that metric in a way that is positive. And sometimes you don't want to touch the returns, but sometimes you do. And understanding at what point you want to step in and start to put in preventative behaviors is important. And it's different based on price point, customer makeup. There's all sorts of things that you need to understand about your customers first before you start to kind of step in with returns. But yes, it is a big problem. Yeah.
Sophie, I would assume, given you help people do all those things that Sarah's just outlined with returns, that the businesses you're working with have kind of got past the organisational structure barrier, or are they coming to you to try and solve that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree that not having anyone in the company truly owning the return problem, let's call it, is a challenge. So I think our experience that actually there are other benefits like of solving the returns, which are easier to sell. So it's more like, if I talk from my perspective, actually pitching like reducing returns is always like really good, but that's probably not the reason why client will actually buy your product. So I think it's more about how they can improve the customer experience, and then we sell more to like customer experience manager, e-commerce manager, and that is more like also sort of like angle and how you can turn return into profit, more like for building loyalty, making your customer more loyal to the brand, like the experience. So that would be more actually the sort of like sales pitch, because if you actually enter with the angle of actively reducing returns, yes, everyone knows it's a problem, but no one will actually, it's like, everyone is an employee in the company. They have like their annual objective. If no one on their annual, review has, reduce the return rate, why anyone would care? And I think it's also a problem sometimes when we actually know in advance, when we talk with some prospect, that the product, the project will not be successful because we already feel that no one is really owning it. So I think it's both a challenge to enter, like to just like implement a solution will actually effectively reduce returns, but the importance for us is not only to implement, it's also to make sure that then the client will be successful with the solution, and then comes, who are we going to work with, who will be actually looking at the data and working with it to actually reduce returns. So I mean, I agree with the statement, and I think it is a problem. And of course, the bigger the company will get, maybe the more likely they will have someone in charge of that. But most of the brands, are more like SME, or like they have maybe like 10 person working in the e-commerce team, and there is no one who is like 100% focusing on that problem.
Cool, thank you. It's like, sounds like it's one of those things that we used to say at uni. If you photocopying the article or taking the book out the library is not the same as reading it. Implementing the return software does not solve your returns problem. Someone has to actually put in the work. Love that. Thank you, Sophie. Josh, would you agree with this one?
Yeah, I couldn't really agree with the statement more. And I think from the perspective that we are often brought in to solve this problem, it sings so true that there's a lacking thread of responsibility throughout the organization. And I think what Sophie's said about it being on an annual review or a KPI, being tracked at a headline level for the business, without that, you don't get buy-in. So we often have operations departments being like, oh, these returns, they're coming in horrible packaging. They're really hard to handle. We've got to get the money back to the customer really quickly. We want that inventory back for sale, especially when there's discounts going on and they want a good sell-through rate. There are huge operational challenges with returns, but the truth is the operation isn't the place that's really going to reduce the quantity of returns. It's going to handle them better and make them more available to the business. You need buy-in from systems, and you need the data from what type of products are coming back so you can make changes at the front end, which is really where a lot of the returns reduction can happen, in the user experience, in product description, imagery, fit finders. But it ends up siloed. You have a marketing team who don't have the data from operations about where the problems are. You have operations hopping that there are loads of returns, but they're not feeding that data to the right places. So I actually think this statement sort of cuts to a core of a lot of the issue for retailers, is a lack of coordination around the data. And like anything, our strong belief is what's measured is managed. Most of your returns have some hidden information in them. There are certain type of items, there's a certain customer demographic, order size, it's all in there as to where the solution is.
Yeah, I have to say, I did have a little debate with myself about whether the first thing we'd talk about was organizational structure or data, because I think they're so closely aligned as a how do you actually solve this problem? Is it about getting everyone together, but then you've got to get the data, so it's not one poor person with a spreadsheet, and that's
sorry to finish.
Josh, I'm gonna pause you for a second there, because we got. I'm sure we're going to come back to the full data piece later, because I want to, apart from anything else. But I want to get Amber's perspective on this, because we're talking to retailers from a different angle, because not often getting called in about the return. So do you see this with the clients you work with too, Amber?
Yeah, most certainly. I think sort of my perspective of the angle is that returns isn't necessarily the hottest of topics to kind of take within an organizational structure and kind of try and, I guess, sell internally. Whereas conceptualizing it as a principle of financials and sustainability can be a really good way of kind of getting an organizational structure to kind of take the topic quite seriously. And I think if you try to kind of start embedding those sustainability principles within the kind of company's mission and company's vision, then it can kind of really help to, I guess, bring that sustainability and the reason why you need to take returns seriously to the forefront.
Cool. Okay. The reason I sound a bit slightly distracted there is because I was just deliberating whether it's worth us discussing this, because I think we've just all pretty much just come to the conclusion it's data, ownership, and org structure. Anyone got anything else they would put into the mix other than data, org structure? Sarah?
I think one of the things that I would say is take the time to state the problem. So lots of people jump to solving the problem without stating what the actual problem is. So understand. It is looking at your data, but making sure you understand the problem that is causing the return. But it's a different thing to solve than to state.
Love that answer. Thank you. So we lost you partway through there, but we got the key nugget, which is actually what is your returns problem, which I think is very easy to go returns bad, returns bad. Anyone else got anything other than state the issue, data? Josh, you want to come in again?
I think I'm probably echoing what Sarah has to say, but it's the actual human piece beneath it, in terms of because you can have lots of data points, but you might not necessarily understand the user's perception and challenge behind it. And I think actually getting some qualitative as well as just quantitative data is really important as well.
Cool. Okay. That brings us on quite nicely to my next one, which we'll spend a bit longer on than the last one, which is the hardest thing to manage in returns is customer expectations. Let's talk a bit about customer service and those elements. Sophie, what's your perspective on this? Is this what you find people are wanting to get to grips with, or is it purely a cost focus?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, of course, when we speak with our clients, and what we also help them work with is to make returns smoother and easier for the client, because we believe that long term it will actually benefit the brand and build long-term loyalty. So I don't think making returns harder, complex for the client, is actually on the long-term game going to be beneficial for the brand. That's not how they're going to reduce returns ultimately. But I think what's also important, we see more and more that every client have their own preferences, as it is, for local payment method, you have local shipment method, and people want to choose how they get to return the product. Maybe they're used to drop it off at the closest drop-off point. Maybe they like to have it pick it up from home. Some people want to return in the store, and that's one of the things that we actually encourage most of our clients when they have stores to do, because we see brands who are not having a pure full omni-channel experience, but a lot of clients want to return in the store. And and that is, they don't care if the technology is not in place, that they don't understand. They bought something from Dara online. They just want to walk to the store and return it. And Dara is doing this perfectly fine, actually. But I think that, customers are becoming more and more demanding, and some, brands are doing like the return process so smooth now that they expect that from anyone. And I think it's really important for brands like sort of like level up the return experience that they deliver, to make that they match the customer expectation, so that the customer would actually come and buy again from the brand.
I think there's that, we talk about the customer expectation, but the easier you make it for the customer to get the product back, if that's what you want them to do, is to get the product back, you want to make that happen as quickly as possible for your own profits.
Yes.
Because the sooner it comes back in, the sooner you can sell it again, which in terms of fashion, when we have the seasons ending, then we're making more profit because we're probably at a higher price point than if it's sale and then it's just a problem when it comes back in. So I think you're spot on there, Sophie. Who else has got a perspective on customer expectations and returns? Is it one of the hardest things to manage, Amber?
Yeah, so I kind of got sort of two angles to consider this point. So I guess the first is sort of setting customer expectations in relation to product detail and how they kind of perceive the item itself. And then secondarily, kind of setting the customer expectations in relation to the process of returns. So thinking about the first one, setting customer expectations in relation to product data, I kind of agree that in practice, it can be quite difficult to kind of set that expectation, and a lot of it will kind of very much depend on the consumer demographic. But arguably in the long terms, if the catalyst for your returns is misinterpretation of the product, then it could be one of the simplest ways to sort of improve your return rates and kind of in turn improve the overall customer experience. I think a lot of the time, a poor customer experience in relation to returns itself can kind of come down to kind of a lack of understanding about the business that they're buying for, sort of key principles, key values, what that returns process looks like. And I think that if you can educate the buyer ahead of time, before they even get to a point of needing to go through a return, then the entire experience end to end is going to be a lot more seamless for them, and you're going to kind of retain that customer and overall better have them kind of meet the expectations that they would foresee.
Josh, was that a hand going up there?
It was, yeah. And I think in terms of managing expectations, we've seen some really good design work done within the packaging realm. So with Ted Baker, they did a sleeve around their suit box. When you turn it round, it had the returns information and a sequential barcode already on it for returns. So I know that we all have lots and lots of emails, and I think we can assume that potentially you're getting that information, get to the customer, and it's in their mind as to how to interface with your returns. But at moment of receipt is a good opportunity to communicate what they need to do next, if that is something they need to do. You can even just put a QR code on there which goes to your digital content regarding how the return should then be processed, how they can digitally print their label in store, etc., etc. But I think at point of receipt of goods is a good place to manage customer expectation.
Cool. Sarah, I want to come to you next, but I want to come to you with my next question, if that's all right with you, which is a 0% returns rate would be a failure. Do you agree there's some good returns and some returns we want, or should we be aiming for 0?
I think 0 is an unrealistic expectation. I think returns are a factor of selling stuff online. I think that's just a reality, but they are much higher than they need to be. I think one of the things that when we look at returns and it is different. Every retailer will have a very different return rate profile. And we only work in the fashion domain, but just to understand. So if you look at your customers, if you look at your profitability of each customer in terms of who are returners and who are not returners, in some cases you'll find that only 10% of your customers return things. And then if you look at those 10%, some are really profitable, in which case that's okay. Some of them are deeply unprofitable, in which case just don't ban them, just don't email them, right? Or understand if they return their first purchase, and then what happens when they make their second purchase. And in many cases, once they make this, they become profitable. So understanding the customer journey from first purchase onwards, and then understanding it. And for some retailers, it's just a horrible mess and they become more and more unprofitable. But for other retailers, the second purchase makes them profitable. So actually what you should be caring about is not the return rate reduction necessarily, but the next purchase. So I think every retailer is very different. It depends on price point and the brand perception. And you'll have the same customers sometimes who just love it. So that depends on how they feel about the brand, or depend on how they respond and react from a returns perspective. So I think you're never going to get to zero, but you can definitely get to kind of, you can definitely take kind of 5-10 percentage points off where they are, particularly in the UK. Yeah.
Got you. Sophie, right back in your intro, you were talking about how this varies from country to country. So I'm guessing you would agree that 0% is not achievable. But, what do you find being an achievable reduction with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think it also very much depends like where they start from and what product they're selling, and again, type of customer they have. But I think like a reduction of about like 5 points is something which is definitely achievable. And we have seen like more, like higher decrease. But I think what's also important, and what we try also to like tell our clients that, when you start to work with returns, you also need to change your vision on it, like your perspective as a brand, because you need to understand that 95% of your clients hate to return product. They just want to buy the product which they're going to keep on the first place. And I think we had a lot of clients who came to us and thought like they had a lot of client bracketing, buying different sizes of the same product. But a lot of clients, even when they do that, they don't like it. They would prefer to know which side they would actually buy. So I think like changing perspective on how you actually see that, and making yourself more actually at the service of your client to help them not return your product is important. Otherwise, you will only like work negatively with the problem. And I think if you take that down, then you can actually, then that's what we do. So we help clients identify which products are actually most often bought into level size. And not to say like you should blacklist these customers. Of course, some customers are unprofitable, and we are going to help them work with that. But if you identify the product that the customer are struggling the most to find the right size, then you can focus your efforts on sizing guide, on size recommendation on these products. So I would say that if you change, the way you view that product, and you actually understand that you are in it with your client, and that's also what we tell our brands, like communicate to your client on the return journey, that if they can share more with you, they will help you reduce your return rate. They're going to help you achieve your sustainability, goals, and they're going to help you improve the product. And we really see like, a good virtuous circle entering in place when we have like a strong brand with very loyal clients. Then they really engage, they give more feedback, and that creates like really, really positive, results. So I think it's like this sort of like positive dynamic that brands need to find, and then can give like really good results. Of course, it doesn't apply to everyone. Some brands have more like transactional relationship with the client, but if you have the chance to have this sort of like brand loyalty, that is really something that as a brand you can capitalize on to engage your clients in your mission and in your objectives.
Yeah, it's totally, you're getting a grip on returns. It's like you get these quick wins, these operational quick wins, then you get these profitability quick wins. And then if you start using the data, it turns into this brilliant virtuous circle, just like you were explaining there, Sophie, and it suddenly becomes, the whole scenario becomes better. We've had a couple of questions come in from the audience that quite directly link in to what you're just talking about there, Sophie. So I'm gonna come to those. Those of you watching, if you want to ask a question live, please send it through to us. We've already got 3 brilliant ones to talk about, but I'm sure you've got some more for us. So the first one I want to come to is this one from Tina Marr, which is probably the biggest question in fashion, I would say. How do you mitigate multiple variant orders? That's different colors, different sizes, somebody wanting to do a little fashion show at home to work out what they're doing. How do you mitigate that to stop returns before they start? Sarah, I think we have to come to you first on this one.
But a little bit. Yeah, so I think one of the things that we would spend some time doing is we'll look at, so multi-variant comes in, as you say, a number of different options. So you've got the same customer who buys the same product in at least 2 sizes over any, so I might buy a size 10, send it back, and then buy a size 12. We would count that as a multi-variant. So it's definitely a sizing issue. And then I keep one or send all of them back. So that is typically 10 to 15% of returns for a single brand retailer, kind of 20 to 25% if it's a multi-brand retailer. And then you've got people who put multiple options of the same garment categories. I might put 2 or 3 dresses, 2 or 3 tops, 2 or 3 jackets. I just want to see which one's right for me. And that's typically 30 to 50%. So then understanding what is it? So if your heaviest returners are also your heaviest customers. So in many cases, you know their size, right? So you know that their best size is X, Y, or Z. So actually you can predict their size, and you can and don't show them things that are not available in their size. Like that's one key piece. Secondly, you can start, we can tell you, for example, like women with a large bust will return high neck. So don't show those women those sorts of products, because you're going to get the return. So you need to build these propensity models that say, you've got a bunch of products, you've got loads of products, right, that they're going to want to buy. So put things in front of them. So those 3 dresses they take to try on at home, they end up just keeping one more. You only need a couple of them to keep one more of those items, and you've improved your revenue and you've reduced your return rate. So it's about really delighting the customer and understanding that this customer loves these sorts of things and wants to keep, and they'll look gorgeous and feel amazing in those sorts of things. So how do you put those sorts of things in front of them so that they love the brand, they feel great, and they end up keeping more of what they buy rather than returning more of what they buy? So I think there's lots of things in the data that will really help you to build that piece. But then you end up, you can reduce the returns on the sizing, but you can also increase the kept purchases for the multiple options piece.
I don't think I've ever heard it put in that way of getting them to keep one more item. Not just about reducing the number of items they order in the first place, but improving the selection that they pick so as they keep a higher percentage of it, if that makes sense. I think
yeah, it's interesting because often what you're doing with various algorithms will be just they're optimized on conversion rate. But if your return rate is 30, 40, 50%, you are actually making your return rate worse. You're just pushing the products that again return more. So you need to understand how to really build those return rate propensities into what you do for your customers. And that's what allows them to buy more and keep more rather than just return it all, if that makes sense. Sorry.
No, got you. Sophie, anything you'd add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would also reiterate is that what we also see with a lot of our clients, that the customers who returns most often are also very often the most profitable clients. Then you of course have you might have a group of clients who are actually buying a lot and returning a lot, and they are not profitable clients. And I think that we have seen a lot of brands taking like drastic measure, for these clients, like blocking them. And I think that our recommendation will always be like communicate transparently, because a lot of customers are not aware, of the behavior, and also because it has just been taught to them, like you can buy 2 sizes and return 1. So they think it's like it's a natural thing. And free returns have also been pushing that, and I guess we will come to a point in the discussion about like paid and free returns. But of course, if something is free, then they don't understand that someone is bearing the cost, and who is bearing the cost? The company and the planet. So I think like tying back as well, when we were talking about customer expectation, I think one thing that we also recommend and talk a lot with our clients is how you communicate on the return policy, about, so giving very clear, policy rules, so they know exactly what they're going to expect in terms of if there are refund fee and things like that, but also communicating about, please, adjust your consumption, be careful with what you're buying, because, we are conscious of the impact of the returns on the environment, and some brands like start to apply a small fee to actually reduce the cost. And I think that a lot of customers become more and more aware of that, and I strongly believe that in the long term it will actually have an impact on the return rate for many brands. I see that we are just at the beginning of that. When we started the company 4 years ago, this type of question, like how do you mitigate multiple variants, like that was out of the scope. Like, retailers were so afraid about affecting the conversion rate. Anything which like affect the conversion rate was just like out of question. Now I think that we are in a new sort of like macroeconomics and everything, like people are looking more at profitability, and this has become more of a hot topic about how to actually reduce returns and prevent that. But I think it's also a lot about how you actually communicate with the clients, and also telling that you have also really good advice, because what you're selling, Sarah, is great, but I think sometimes it's also hard to implement, like especially for smaller brands. So what we also see is like actually having like a support, online support. Like you can say like, if we need advice on sizing, we have like a sizing expert, especially for example for underwear, which is super tricky to buy online. You can say like, from 4 to 6 on Friday or whatever day you choose, because of course you cannot be online all the time. We have a sizing expert available for you. And what we see that most clients, they would rather wait to place the order with the right size after have chat with someone, that buying 3 sizes and returning 2. So that will also be a piece of advice for brands to mitigate that, buying different sizes and type of product because I don't know what's going to fit me. Most clients just do that just because they don't know what's going to fit them, not because they want to just play around and take Instagram picture. Some will, but not the majority.
Cool. Thank you for that, Sophie. I'm going to come to Sarah quickly because I feel like she wants to come back again on that question. Then I'll come to Amber. Then we're going to go to the next question, which plays totally into Josh's wheelhouse, just so everyone knows what's going on. Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just nodding. I agree. I think there's so much that. So in some of those chat solutions, I think particularly as you say for those smaller brands, I think there's so much you can do to create really gorgeous experiences that. We started out doing kind of a whole bunch of stuff around a fit, and we just couldn't get the return rate down, and we got people to measure themselves. We did all this, anyway, then we stopped and said, right, let's just look at the data, because all the return reasons at that point, everyone was saying it's all about sizing, but then it was a much smaller percentage than we had originally anticipated that was causing that piece. But I think also understanding the product at a level. So if you plot your products on a category basis and you plot each SKU by return rate and volume, you'll have some products that have a very high return rate and high volume. And if you understand what it is about those products, you will find that there are certain things you just should not put on a dress, or certain things that do not work for your customer on handbags, or whatever it is. And that will help you to understand. You feed that back into your buying and merchandising teams, then you see that kind of coming on down the line. So there's lots of different areas to understand and to review, but I think it's interesting to see how that will impact the variant question as well.
Cool. Amber, anything you'd like to add in to that one about multivariants?
Yeah, honestly, not particularly. I feel like I'm finding this all very interesting from my side. So nothing that I particularly want to add. I guess just kind of to summarize what everybody's so far been saying, it really doesn't seem to be about preventing returns. It just is about improving the experience at the onset, and therefore reducing return rate.
Nicely put. Right, Josh, I said I was going to come to you first on the next question, which fits in is a bit we haven't talked about, which is the product arriving not in the state it should arrive in, which I'm guessing you know a fair bit around. So Mark Dicer is asking, we focus on product damage, so we try to eliminate returns by designing better packaging. Any take on this for them?
Yeah, it's massive for us. I mean, it's a double-edged sword though as well, because you should not take the exceptional scenarios and then overpack everything to deal with the Ace Ventura who really treated your parcel horribly. It was left outside, kicked over a garden fence, etc. So it's a fine line, and I always encourage our customers, we work with them to value engineer, to try and find the minimum viable packaging approach. So obviously damages, it's very industry dependent. I think, if you're selling machinery, electronics, etc., or homewares, glass, then we really have a significant challenge in those spaces. In apparel, damage is less so. I think water is the big fear point, but actually there's much less water in the supply chain than people realize. And I think this is the same as all the rest of the conversation, which is what's measured is managed. So what we work with our retailers to do is say, okay, what are your damage instances, in what locations, and what value of orders, what packaging type are those occurring? If it's very, very low, then perhaps our first point of call is, okay, well, maybe we can look at reducing grade. We can reduce the carbon footprint of the materials you're using. We can actually start to reduce packaging grade to find out where that line is between best carbon footprint and cost and minimal damages occurrence. But I do think, this is a really important point, because the carbon footprint saving in terms of material used in packaging pales into insignificance when it comes to considering the number of wasted journeys, dual delivery, shipped air that is associated with damaged goods, failed deliveries, etc. One final sort of point on this as well, other than just sort of finding your minimum viable product, is a lot of this can be mitigated by choice of courier and good in-flight rescheduling, etc. Because I find the most damage that happens in the apparel market is left in a safe place. That's really where in the supply chain we see the most damage. And you can be quite collaborative with your couriers on what options they actually offer to your end customer on delivery. And you can also partner with couriers that offer in-flight rescheduling, locker boxes, other more convenient methods that prevent that risk of damage. So yeah, I think it's a really important point, and a lot of people might just be gathering returns and not considering packaging's role in that.
As someone who regularly got incredibly frustrated about the fact that the mascara she was buying online came in a jiffy bag wrapped in its additional layer of bubble wrap and wrapped in tissue paper, I love the idea of brands finding the minimum level of packaging needed to take something safely to the consumer, because that's such a big angle. Anyone want to add anything else in on packaging for Mark? Or we're good on packaging? I think Josh did sew that one up completely. Okay. Sophie was saying about the fact we might come back to talk about pricing of returns. I think it would be a massive error if we didn't talk about pricing of returns. But in order to send us off on a slightly random angle with should we pay for returns or not, I'm going to pick up on something that I'll be honest, the panelists have been discussing secretly in the background whilst we've been doing this, which is about what you do if you don't want someone to send the product back. Sometimes there is you've got so what I'm trying to say is we could charge customers for returns. A lot of businesses offer free returns as a promotional method, and the rest of the time returns is paid for. A lot of companies do free returns anyway. We hear a lot of noise in the news about we should be charging customers for returns, and so starting to do it because they can't get a handle on it more cleverly than that. Personally, I think it's a bit of a blunt weapon, should be deployed carefully. But Dan from Wild Nutrition has asked this brilliant question, which I know is something a lot of companies are now deliberating, which is it worth having the product shipped back? Especially in the furniture space, if someone doesn't like that sofa, is it worth us having that brought back to us? Should we tell them to donate it to charity? Should we tell them to deal with it closer to source? Obviously, Dan in the nutrition camp is talking about this as well. So is there, especially as a B Corp who's trying to reduce that carbon footprint of things coming in and out and in and out, should we just leave product with the customer? There you go. I've given you about a million things to discuss, panel. Sophie, you were talking about this earlier, and you've probably got the best across Europe experience on this. So what's your take on this? Should we be letting the customer just keep it?
Yeah, I mean, or my answer on that would be like the brand should own the afterlife of the product. Then how they actually execute it and what the best way to execute it is, of course, to be seen. As you say, like probably like, shipping back a sofa from, I don't know, UK to Sweden isn't worth it. And the sofa is maybe not resellable anyway. But in that case, the brand should take care of, disposing it. I don't think it's the right way to let the customer take care of that. Then I think to me the biggest problem and question on that is more like when it's not financially sustainable to actually return the product, and brands actually are still shipping it back but not like reselling it. And we know, everyone I think here has now heard about what happens to fast fashion when it's being returned. So I think that is even of a more big problem in here, like how to actually ensure that you can put this problem back to shelves. And this is very hard to crack, of course. If a product is worth less than $20, there is no reason why the retailer would actually, pay for the shipping back and putting it back to shelf and resell it. So in that case, probably having a charity or something that you can actually sell it secondhand, facilitation of secondhand sale of these products. I hope that we will see more emerging solutions and that retailers will come further in that, thought process and accept that they also need to be more transparent with the customer. Because a lot of customers don't know actually that it's going to work like that. Also surprised, like products are not back to shelves? I don't know that.
Completely agree. Yeah. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Sarah, please expand.
I think it's really important to understand the CO2 emissions that are associated with. We are very passionate about helping reducing the waste, both in terms of the overproduction, but also in terms of the return. So I think it's kind of, and so if you're absolutely, so many of these returns that come back, especially if it's, if it's a trend item and it's the end of the season, you can't resell that, and that is the landfill piece. So I think it's careful planning to make sure you are producing what you will sell, and that you are mindful of how you are presenting those products to the customer, so that they're buying what they want and need. And I think some transparency around that would be great. But I always find, I hope and pray that the consumer will start to vote with their wallet, and yet I don't think they are yet. And I think we all as a business really care about sustainability, and I think if I think cost kind of wins currently, and I think I don't know when that tipping point comes, but I think it is a really important point about understanding and being transparent about what happens to all of this terminal stock.
Yeah, we need the consumers to start voting. We need the growth of the second-hand market, which is increasingly kind of almost blurring into what we're talking about. But we also need more legislation, like is happening on the continent, not in the UK, but in the continent, about not being able to send stuff to burn end of line, to do various things. And it's going to be fascinating, I think, over the next 18 months to see how that impacts the behaviour of the retailers and then how that changes things elsewhere. But I got quite meta there.
I've got a few examples on that topic that I think are worth mentioning. So we do a lot of work with Vivo Barefoot, and they have a 100-day experience guarantee on the shoes. If you don't like it, you can send it back within 100 days. And that means they get this second grade stock, which was going, not being used or potentially not resaleable. So they launched Revivo, which is their circular proposition. It allows them to sell second grade stock that's being refurbished, gives those shoes a second life, and they've incentivized existing customers to say, hey, look, when it gets to the end of the life, just because you're not happy with them, there might be a second life for that shoe, return it, and we can give you a discount on your next purchase. I think it's a really clever way to handle that return stock, and it shows their commitment as a B Corp to giving end of life. It's great positive PR for them as a brand, and it's another revenue stream in the sort of plain truth. And I think if you are a B Corp, you're likely to potentially be differentiated around that. You're likely to have more sustainability communicated in your proposition. So it's kind of like that. Think before you print this email message that it's become old hat now. But at that checkout, there's plenty of brands we work with that say, look, please only order what you need. This is the carbon footprint associated with returns. Please consider it. And to Dan's point, there are some returns platforms that allow retailers who are shipping internationally to sell product, centralize their returns internationally, and then sell product on Marketplace or similar, so that the brand value is potentially protected, but that unnecessary journey back to the UK to then be handled or potentially discarded is avoided. So I think really it comes down to what I think Sarah alluded to, which is understanding the carbon footprint. And the truth is, we should be making decisions in a data-driven way. And if something's been shipped all that distance and there is another way to use it at point of receipt, then we should try and minimize the return logistics wherever possible.
Totally agree, Josh. Amber, your take on this?
Sorry, again, I'm just fascinated and nodding my head. No, I completely agree. But yeah, unfortunately, nothing more to add on the topic specifically.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So I managed to ask you all such an utterly ludicrously long question that we could totally fail to address. Should you charge for returns or not? So, quick run through of all of you. Is there ever a case where we should be switching from free returns to returns? Should we be on free returns? Should we segment it by customer? What do we think? Who wants to tackle it?
I can jump. No, so I think it depends. I think again, I would take the time to model it out. I would say, so I'd have a look at the customers, and I'd have a look at the behaviour, and I'd have a look at the cost, what it genuinely costs you to process each return. That's the packaging, getting it back in, getting it back on the shelf, getting it back in the warehouse, the whole end-to-end cost. And then there will be some. So if, for example, we see some retailers say, if you order over X, you get free returns. But guess what happens when you order over X? Your return rate goes. That is an absolute direct correlation. So understanding the economics in that, and understanding kind of to which customers. There are some customers that you just got people who just never return stuff, and customers who always return stuff. So for those non-returners, so understanding what is it, don't get them to, like, if they're buying a jacket, then get them to put something small, a small ticket thing that's going to go with their jacket rather than another jacket, right? Because another jacket, they're going to return one of those jackets. So understanding what kind of experience you're creating at that point at the basket page. So what sorts of things allow them to increase their basket size a bit, but not so much that they're going to definitely return one of the things in that item versus. So I think it's understanding who the customers are and properly looking at the data. And then there will be some cases where it absolutely makes sense to charge them, and other cases where it absolutely makes sense to do them for free. Or if you're lucky enough to have loads of stores, they're free if they come in. So there's lots of different things, but I think unfortunately it's not a one size fits all answer. I think it's a case by case, and I think retailers have to take the time again to state the problem, understand where the opportunity is, understand the unit economics for each type of customer and each type of product. So
it comes into this piece of we've got to get focused on what we're trying to get the customer to do, and then find the right way to make them do that. And sometimes it's going to be what we show them, sometimes it's the marketing we send them, sometimes it's the financials, but it's that it's not a do we charge or not. That's not really the question, is it? The question is, how do we get the customers to behave in the way we want them to behave, whatever that might be. Sophie, you're almost smirking there. So what's your thought on this?
No, I mean, I completely agree with Sarah that, before digging into that question, Ron should really take a step back, because we have a lot of clients and prospects asking us very bluntly, like, should we charge for returns? And my answer is always like, well, it really depends on your brand strategy. Are you in an acquisition phase? Are you building loyalty? Who are your clients? How do they behave? Are they price sensitive or not? And I think it's always worth trying. So we also encourage them to actually try and see, because and again, I mean, this is a topic which I find now is really like hot, and a lot of brands are actually questioning this. And because, it's like a lot of, brands started to implement fees on return, it has become like a very hot topic. Like 4 years ago, no one would question if you should offer free returns. So I think it's very healthy in a way that brands are actually wondering, should we or shouldn't we? What we see is also that depending on your price positioning, it will have a different impact on your conversion rate and on the return rate, and obviously on the refund fee. So we actually recently wrote a blog article about it, and we basically had two cases. On one side you had like a fast fashion brand, and on the other side you had a premium brand, and both do basically same turnover. Obviously they don't have absolutely not the same number of orders, because fast fashion would have much more orders, the premium brand would have less. And if you implement refund fee, how would these customers behave? The premium brand or customers are very insensitive to price, so they wouldn't mind if they have to pay like $7 or even $15 on a return. But fast fashion customers would be more sensitive to the price, but we also be more than sensitive to actually reducing the bracketing that they're usually doing. So it will have an impact on the conversion, but it will also have an impact on the return rate, and it will have a big impact on actually how much cash you will just get from these refund fee. Because if you start charging $1 or $2, but you have so many orders, actually the cash you're going to get in is much higher than the premium brand, who has much less orders. So I think going through this sort of like calculation for your own brand and trying to see, okay, and having different scenarios and then testing, because we also work with a fast fashion brand and they implemented the refund fee and it did not affect the conversion at all, because the customer base is extremely loyal, so they know more or less the size. So their return rate is actually about 13%, which is very low for fashion. So you have like, and again, like there is no like one size fits all, but I think it's really important to be like clear about the objective and how you're going to achieve these objectives with what your business is. What are you selling? Who are your clients? And how that's going to affect. And I don't think there is like you cannot predict everything. So the best, I think, is to also like A/B test. And see how that plays out with the return rate and the conversion rate to then take a sort of like final decision on if you should implement or not. But I would say in general, always reward loyalty, always reward your best clients. So your best clients should probably enjoy free returns and always in the store because that doesn't cost much, and it's also like much likely to please the client.
I love that answer, Sophie. I think you've just given everyone almost like a complete return strategy to work their way through a full year's worth of optimization.
I see all my nuggets. So.
Whilst we do the next bit, if you're able to drop a link to that blog post in the comments for everybody, that would be amazing, because I'm sure many of them are trying to.
Yeah, that blog was going to be in French, but I guess Google Translate will do the magic. It's not public, but when you
put it in there. We've probably got some French people here who can read it anyway, and then the rest of us can just Google Translate it and muddle our way through. That would be cool if you could add the link. Right, we are bearing down on the top of the hour. So Mark, Tina, thank you so much for adding so many questions in the comments, but we're not going to manage to get to them. Panelists, if you want to quickly reply to them in the comments, feel free to go ahead and do that. Anyone watching the replay, I'm not going to show all the questions because that would take us the rest of the 5 minutes to work our way through them. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a final question to our panelists, which is, what's your key takeaway? For someone who's been watching this, who've gone, wow, there's so much returns, there's so much stuff I could do. What's the key thing they should take away from it? And like we did at the beginning of the intros, I'm going to start with Amber and then we'll work our way round. And panelists, if you keep your answer to a minute or less, that would be really helpful. Amber, what would your takeaway be from this session?
Yes, I think my kind of top tip or my kind of key takeaway for this is always to kind of seek an exchange of value in a return. So if a customer is making a return, always find out the reasons why and capture as much data as you can. Sort of take every opportunity for data collection, and then don't just capture the data and do nothing with it. Make sure that you act on that data, do what your data is telling you.
So spot on. That's where the big value comes in. When you're getting that data and you can start making the big front of everything improvements to then improve the whole thing. Love it. Thank you. Josh?
I think everyone's going to talk about a similar thing. So I'm going to go at the packaging angle and say, remember that is the most important communication point for the customer as to how you can get them to engage with that process properly. And also consider the operational efficiency and the improvement in customer experience that you can gain by using dual journey packaging with 2 peels and seals, a very clear open here. It will speed up your operation. It will speed up your returns processing. And it will minimize the amount of wasted space and huge balls of packing tape and bin bags that you receive.
Yes, so true. Random packaging.
Yes.
Warehouse nightmare. Sophie, your key takeaway, please.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Amber said, and I think the key to actually achieve that is to have a digital return portal and digital return solution. And I think so many brands still have manual processes, but if you ask your customer to fill in a return form on a paper, I mean, one, they will not feel engaged to do it, and second, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to actually collect the data in a structured manner. So I think this will be like really the starting point. If you really want to tackle the return problem, you need to digitalize the entire process to start with.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sophie. And Sarah, last but definitely not least.
So I'm going to say it's a little bit controversial. So I think the data is key. The only thing I'd say is all the work we've done, what people say and what they do can be very different things. So when they fill in forms, be very careful that you validate that what they're saying in the forms is actually true in the actual data. And so much of it can be validated in the actual data. So I think just be very aware of, you've got so much in the fact that it's being returned. You can link it back to the order number, you can link it back to the customer, you can link it back to all the product data. So you try and use that to understand what and why, and then you can state the problem, and then you can go and find that low-hanging fruit and fix those problems.
Brilliant. Panelists, thank you all so much. I'm going to hide you away now for a moment and bring this up for everybody. All of you who turned up live, thank you so much for coming along to the session. I think we just made it through a techie e-commerce discussion without mentioning AI once. I think we all deserve a prize, including in the comments. Phenomenal. Not that AI isn't important in this arena, but it's just quite amazing we didn't get dragged there. Thank you all for coming along and watching live. Huge thank you to our panelists for being brilliant. Huge thank you to our sponsors of this session, which is eDesk, Tidio, and Penny Black. They're all brilliant. You'll find links to them somewhere around the video you're watching now, so please do go and check them out. Thank you all for your questions. There's been a fascinating discussion going on in the comments. All I have left to tell you all is that you can sign up right away now to join us for the next one of these, where we will be talking about personalization. another end-to-end discussion in the world of e-commerce. We haven't yet finalized the lineup for that one, but you can see some of the guests, and you can get yourself signed up right now. That's at web9.ecommerceexplored.com, going live on the 10th of April. So hopefully we will see you there. Those of you watching the replay, thank you as well. We love you too. And thank you all for being here and for being part of today's e-commerce explored webinar. Bye, everybody.